So this chapter of the book looks into policy element and style. So what is a policy? It's a well-written policy that clearly defines principle, provides guidance to those um, that must make present and future decisions and serve as implementation roadmap. So the policies need support documents to give them context. So this is the policy hierarchy. So guiding principles, policy standard, then you have guidelines, procedures, and baselines that are developed. So standards, these serve as a specification for element of policies and also dictates what's mandatory. You got example, you got a password policies. It's got to be unique, it's got to have, certain lower and upper cases. So you must not share your passwords. It's got to have special characters and so forth. So this is something that you're familiar with. Baseline. These are aggregate to implement standard and security controls. So there are specific categories or groupings. So you've got platforms, devices, ownership. So the reasons that we have a baseline is to be uniform and consistent. So here's an example of an Active Directory group configuration. So guidelines are best through best, there are best ways of teaching tools. Objectives of guideline is to help people conform to standards, using software languages, and standards are not mandatory. So here's some example guideline. A good way to create strong password is to think of phrase, song title, and another group of words. So basically it's saying if you have a sentence, pick the first word or the last word, or you can switch letters that sound like numbers and so forth. So procedures, these are instructions for how policy standard, baseline, and guidelines are carried out. So procedures focus on a step with specific starting and ending points. So you got a simple step listing a sequential actions, and you got a hierarchical. These include both generalized instructions for experienced users and detailed users, graphics, pictures, that are used to symbolize steps, and you got flow charts to make decisions. Simple step, here are some simple steps of changing policies every 90 days. These may differ from company or organization, from one organization to another. So, pressing hold, Control Alt Delete, and you go through a series of steps that you need to do to change your password as outlined here. Plans and programs. So the function of a plan is to provide strategic and tactical instructions and guidance on how to execute an initiative or how to respond to a situation within a certain time frame, usually with defined stages within design resources. Plans are also referred to as programs. So these are information security plan, vendor management plan, incident response plan, business continuity plan, disaster recovery plan, which could be, natural disaster or, human made and so forth. A lot of backup tapes are kept, in a cave somewhere far away from the organizations. So policies and plans are related. So policy has a format. It can be challenging. They can be complex. So it's got to be written to withstand legal and regulatory scrutiny. So they got to be easy to read and understood. So the starting point of policy is to identify who your audience is going to be. So policy audience, so refers to who is intended for the policy. So policies may be intended for a particular group or employees. So policy may define role for information security officers. And, an organization usually works with outside entities such as partners, vendors, and contractors and so forth, and also applies to them. So policy formats is important to organize your policy, the sections and subsections. Designing a template, there's a lot of great templates out there that you can utilize. Write each policy as a singular policy, group policies together that that can be consolidated. So here's some example singular policy, ISO policy, specific to the role and responsibility of the ISO, the information security officer. Then you got the consolidated policy. So you've got multiple policies, governance policy, address of the role and responsibilities of the board of directors, executive managers, chief risk officers, information security officers, compliance officers, legal counsel, auditors, IT directors, and so forth. So advantages of individual policies: that the policy document can be short, clean, and targeted. There are disadvantages to manage multiple policies. Advantage of consolidation: it presents composite manager statement in a single voice. Disadvantage, is the size and document. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both. So who's going to maintain the policy? So these are management issues. Who will update the policy? What a policy that worked before is not going to work in the future. So who will approve the policy and so forth. Version control of the policy, make sure you keep a version control. As with anything, software policies also have versioning control. So policy introduction, just some of the formalities that you have to follow. Provide context and meaning, the importance of understanding and adhering to policy. Acquaint the readers with the document and its context. Explain the exempt process and consequences for non-compliance. Thank the reader and reinforce the authority of the policies. Policy headings by name and provide the reader with the overview of the policy. Policy goals as a gateway of the content. Even singular policies can have multiple objectives as shown below. Policy statement. So this is kind of a strategic roadmap that you lay out. Policy exception exemption process. So this is a situation where someone may be exempt from the policy, but there may be a situation where it's not possible or practical or harmful. So company A has a security policy to ban digital cameras from its location. However, cameras are required to monitor the property and for employees to get badged in. So that you should have that exemption relayed. So, if it's a top secret, these folks, can't have their personal camera, but you have to have camera to monitor the site and so forth. Here's an example of the exemption. Enforcement, if you're not going to enforce the policy, what good is a policy, right? So the best way to deliver the message that policies are mandatory is to include that penalty for violating the rule. So make sure to enforce the policy. Policy enforcement clause, administrative notation, policy definition. So kind of a glossary information of term. Writing style, make sure the reader understands. It's in plain language, information, documents are easy to update. It's easy to train people, so someone else will have to update the documentation. So plan, there's kind of a guideline, what audience are you writing for? Make sure the sentences are short. Paragraph to one subject, be concise, don't use jargon, use active voice. Use must and not shall to indicate a requirement. Use words and terms consistently throughout your documents. Omit redundant para modifiers, avoid double negations, and so forth. So there's kind of guidelines to how you can develop your policy. So if you have any questions, let me know. Post your questions on Teams or send me an email. Thank you.